What happens when the family scapegoat finally breaks free and leaves their toxic family of origin for good? That's what I'm covering today. You don't want to miss this. Let's dive in. Hi friends, welcome to my channel. If it's your first time here, my name is Tamie M. Joyce. I'm the founder of Tamie M Coaching, and I run a powerful 8-week transformational coaching program called the Freedom Class, specific to healing and recovery from codependency and narcissistic abuse. If that's of interest to you, be sure to stick around till the end of the video, and I'll tell you how you can learn more about my programs. So let's talk about what happens when the family scapegoat finally breaks free and leaves their toxic family of origin for good. And if you're not sure what I mean by the term family scapegoat, you can learn more by watching this video here and this video here. But only after you finish watching this video here, of course. Now the bottom line is, the theory and very real experience of the family scapegoat involves a specific kind of narcissistic abuse in dysfunctional family systems by virtue of the singling out and targeting of one specific member of the family. And the abuse includes, but is not limited to, harsh criticism, shaming, blame shifting, as well as the displacing of unresolved issues, pain, anger, and aggression. Issues, pain, anger, and aggression, by the way, that have little, if anything at all, to do with the person being scapegoated within the family unit. In a narcissistic family, the family blames the scapegoat for their problems as a means of deflecting attention from the real issues and conflicts that need to be addressed, but continue to go unacknowledged while the family finds relief by targeting the chosen scapegoat. As such, the scapegoat is chronically ridiculed, mocked, and punished even for the shortcomings and mistakes of their abusers, as well as the very real relationship crimes that are being committed by other narcissistic family members. As a result, the abuse that a scapegoat endures often leaves them with serious mental and emotional challenges that can follow them around their entire lives, until, of course, they become ready to do whatever it takes to heal, recover, and take much better care of themselves. And this, of course, raises the question, what would happen if the scapegoat were to sever ties and go no contact with their abusive family of origin? Well, to be darn honest with you, I'm in an excellent position to talk about this, having done so successfully what is now more than a dozen years ago, as well as having coached and empowered many clients over the years to finally muster the strength and the courage necessary to be able to do the same for themselves. And here's what I know for sure. When a scapegoat walks away from their abusive family of origin, no matter how passive and subtle or not so subtle the abuse they've endured may have been, the first thing that is likely to happen is that some members of the family are going to try to manipulate and coerce the scapegoat back into the family fold, or at the very least, back into the chaos of the current fight or ongoing drama. And they'll do this so they can continue to use the scapegoat as a repository for their own negative emotions, unresolved issues, and all that they carry in terms of their disowned shadow selves. As a consequence, when a scapegoat leaves their family of origin, they're going to experience a lot of gaslighting, invalidation, devaluation, as well as an extra dose of the manufactured chaos and drama, all of which is designed to hoover the scapegoat back into the abuse cycle, so they remain the primary dumping ground and garbage bin for all the family's negative emotions, unresolved issues, and toxic attitudes and behavior. So it goes without saying that a scapegoat in the process of breaking free will typically experience a ton of confusion and negative emotions about making the decision to permanently cut ties and leave. After all, this is their family we're talking about. And this is particularly true when the scapegoat doesn't have a really strong and clear support system around them. People who actually get it, know the game, and can help them navigate their way out of the nonsense and the insanity of it all. So, they can grapple with irrational guilt, toxic shame, fear, intense feelings of loneliness, in addition to having their subconscious abandonment issues triggered by virtue of even contemplating making the decision to cut the cord. And this is true even though they know they're being abused, and that these people, this family that they love dearly, can't or won't love them back in any real, genuine, consistent, or even remotely healthy way. This leaves the scapegoat facing down the prospect of going it alone in the world, disconnected from any kind of family unit. The very people who have known them their entire lives, their supposed tribe, no matter how painful and destructive belonging to that tribe has been for them. Needless to say, that prospect can be terrifying, even for the strongest of us. Why? Because it triggers our deepest survival instincts, and again, all of our abandonment issues. And for many of us, it also involves doing the deep soul work of healing the orphan archetype. So, our wounded inner child is highly activated, and all of our worst fears triggered. And what adds insult to injury here is the knowing that they're not going to change. After decades of treating you poorly, which for many of us is putting it mildly, we know they aren't suddenly going to morph into decent, kind, loving, and empathic people who sincerely have our best interest at heart. And that's a tough pill to swallow. So the cognitive dissonance can be extremely painful, to say the least. Then there's the grieving. Once the decision to walk away from the tribe permanently is made, we begin the process of grieving the loss of what was as well as what never was. And what we have to understand is that we're living through the complex grieving process as we grieve the loss of people who haven't actually passed on, but are walking around the planet alive and well, or in many cases quite unwell, despite outward appearances, but you get my point. Grieving the loss of people who are still among us, but worse yet, some of which are out there smearing us to smithereens with a highly distorted, if not outright dishonest and completely fabricated narrative in order to cover their own ass, making themselves look like the so-called victim and the scapegoat the villain, when in reality, the absolute opposite is the truth of the matter. Believe me when I tell you, this adds a whole other dimension to what is already a very difficult and excruciatingly painful grieving process. And friends, we don't get through that overnight. It takes time. And the truth is, it feels absolutely soul-destroying while we're going through it, when, in reality, if we do our work, and we do it well, what it ultimately is soul liberating. But tell that to your unhealed, wounded inner child when he or she is fully activated, and you're on the floor in a fetal position, grieving what at the time feels like epic losses, while simultaneously surrendering to the reality, not only do they not love you at all, while you love them deeply, always have and always will, they actually couldn't give a flying fuck about you, your well-being, and therefore, you know you're fundamentally all alone in the world. Painful stuff. Now comment below and tell me whether or not you identify as the family scapegoat. And if so, what are you doing to take care of yourself? Have you begun the process of breaking free? Let me know in the comments section below. Also, if you're struggling with narcissistic abuse in any area of your life, you're likely an excellent candidate for my 8-week transformational coaching program, the Freedom Class. If that's of interest to you, there's a link in the description below where you can apply to see if you qualify for a free one-on-one consultation with either myself or a member of my team. Now, after mustering the courage to say what they need to say, then following through by doing what they need to do in order to break away from their destructive family of origin, there's going to be a lot of work, a lot of healing work that needs to be done in order for the scapegoat to have a shot at finally enjoying the happy, healthy, and secure life that they not only deserve, but have probably been aching for their entire lives. So as I've already alluded to, narcissistic abusers use scapegoats as dumping grounds for their hostility, frustration, and unresolved negative emotions. So it's very common for scapegoats to grapple with feelings of inadequacy and low self-worth. After a lifetime of gaslighting, relentless criticism, blaming, shaming, along with all the other forms of emotional, psychological, and spiritual abuse, naturally the scapegoat is going to have difficulty seeing themselves clearly, as well as regulating their own emotions and coping well with the everyday stresses of life. Therefore, it's also common for the family scapegoat to develop substance abuse issues as a means of medicating from the pain they carry, both consciously and subconsciously. But it doesn't end there. Untreated PTSD and CPTSD symptoms are very common among people who have been cast as the family scapegoat and have yet to begin to do any real healing and recovery work for themselves. The abuse that scapegoats endure not only teaches them that they are unlovable, unworthy, and fundamentally flawed, but it also teaches them to distrust their own thoughts, feelings, and emotions, their intuitive knowing, as well as neglect their own needs, which in turn causes them to have an unhealthy self-concept. And an unhealthy self-concept boils down to a fundamental breakdown in the relationship they have with themselves, which then extends to maladaptive ways of relating with others and the world at large. And this, of course, is the crux of untreated codependency, but with the added challenges that go along with untreated adult child syndrome, as well as scapegoat abuse syndrome, all of which fall under the umbrella of the detrimental effects of narcissistic abuse as a result of long-term exposure to a narcissistic family of origin. So, needless to say, scapegoats have work to do, a lot of work, if they want to learn how to love themselves fully and move on to create a beautiful life for themselves. And, as they say, you can't get well in the same environment where you got sick. So, it's for this reason that going no contact or having as little contact as possible with their family of origin is really important for the scapegoat to consider as a first step in their healing and recovery. Because after years of invalidation, devaluation, and painful chaos, drama, and trauma, their abuser's condescending voice can be all it takes to gaslight and manipulate them back into the abuse cycle. And all that can take is something as simple as a text, a phone call, or a passive-aggressive comment, dig, or cheap shot. In particular, in the early stages of recovery when the scapegoat is still highly vulnerable. If the scapegoat is able to find a solid support system that can guide and encourage them when it comes to setting and maintaining firm boundaries with their family of origin after leaving, whether they've gone full-blown no contact or are simply using the gray rock method while having very little contact, either way, they stand a much better chance of succeeding in helping and healing themselves long-term and fundamentally changing the entire trajectory of their lives for the better. Now that said, once the narcissistic abusers realize the game has changed for real and for good, by virtue of the fact that the scapegoat isn't playing anymore, and to whatever degree has decided they're done, it's very common for members of the narcissistic family to try to isolate the scapegoat via a smear campaign. Why? Because when toxic people realize they can no longer control you, they'll go to great lengths to control what others think and how they feel about you. And to be clear, a smear campaign is nothing less than a narcissist's active efforts to discredit, devalue, invalidate, and oppress a specific target through toxic gossip, blatant lies, as well as loads of twisting, distorting, and lies by omission. It fundamentally boils down to this: they have to assassinate your character as a preemptive measure. It's vital that they maintain control of the narrative, and a big part of how they ensure their success in this regard is they go out of their way to not only gather the troops, but more importantly, manipulate the perception of said troops. And they go to great lengths to pull anyone who will listen onto their team with their distorted narrative, which of course includes the narcissist becoming the victim. Something else the scapegoat is likely going to have to contend with, or at least accept from a distance, if they're smart and taking good care of themselves, is the narcissist's tendency to play the victim to circumstances they not only created, but also perpetuate. I've always found it fascinating just how quickly people who land on the spectrum of destructive narcissism turn into the victim when they realize they're losing control over their chosen scapegoat. And there's a number of reasons for this, not least of which being that the majority of narcissistic abusers are so emotionally immature, inept, and inadequate that they have little to no ability to regulate their own emotions. This means their selected scapegoat, the dumping ground and target for all of their toxicity and negativity, actually plays a massive role in their emotional stability, as long as they're willing to stand still and be abused, that is. When the scapegoat cuts ties with their family of origin, the narcissistic abusers no longer have anyone to project all of their toxicity and suppress negative emotions onto. Instead, they're forced to carry the burden and full weight of it, which is not something they're well prepared or even remotely able to do for any length of time. which is why it's not at all uncommon to see the life of an abuser who no longer has a suitable target or scapegoat begin to become unraveled or fall apart at the seams. Their life quite literally will become more and more unmanageable until they either succeed in manipulating their primary scapegoat back into the toxic abuse cycle, or, failing that, find the next target to use, abuse, and project all over. In the meantime, their emotional stability and ability to cope deteriorates. If they're drinkers, or overeaters, or gamblers, or sex addicts, or whatever, their addictive compulsive behaviors will be on the rise. And of course, the scapegoat will be to blame. The bottom line is, narcissistic abusers without a scapegoat to target will become progressively more vulnerable, needy, anxious, irritable, resentful, angry, hostile, depressed even, as well as obsessed. It's not pretty. Which is why you can bet your bottom dollar as the family scapegoat that after you've left successfully and permanently, your narcissistic family will have to find a new scapegoat to target. Their ability to maintain their false image and persona literally depends on it. When the scapegoat leaves their family of origin, for a time, the abusers won't have anyone to project all of their suppressed toxicity and negative emotions onto. Instead, like I said, they're forced to deal with them on their own. But in the case of a narcissistic family, the problem with this is quite literally impossible for narcissists to do. And it boils down to this. Every dysfunctional family needs a scapegoat in order to be able to maintain the homeostatic balance of the sick family system, the equilibrium, so to speak, no matter how unhealthy that equilibrium may be. So, when one scapegoat leaves, if the prospect of hoovering or manipulating them back into the fold isn't looking good, then they'll be left with no other choice but to choose someone else to scapegoat. And we often ask ourselves and others how narcissists can live with themselves given how they behave, when in reality, this is exactly how they live with themselves. By having a target to project onto, they lighten the load they carry, and in a very sick and perverse way, walk away feeling relieved, better about themselves. Sick stuff, but this is exactly how it works. However, the good news for the scapegoat is, the longer you stay away from your destructive family of origin, and the more you commit to doing your deep dive inner healing and recovery work, the better, more peaceful, joyful, and productive your life will become. The more you do your work, the more your confidence grows. The more your confidence grows, the more you attract good people and good things into your life. The more you step into your full power and potential, the more you live out your divine mission and purpose on this planet. And I promise you, that is a very beautiful thing. Give yourself the gift. You deserve it. How can Tamie M Coaching help you? 4 ways. Number 1, subscribe to my channel and click that notification bell to make sure you get my new video every Friday. Number 2, watch my free web class by clicking on the link in the description below. You'll learn about my personal journey and my professional experience through decades of research specific to healing and recovery from codependency and narcissistic abuse. You'll also learn about some powerful strategies that you can begin to use today. Number 3, if you're not sure where to start, but you want to come and learn from my team and you'd like to be supported by a stellar community of like-minded people who are focused on solutions that actually work, you can learn more about my 8-week transformational coaching program, the Freedom Class, by going to www.tamiemcoaching.com and clicking on programs and reviews for all the details. And number 4, if you want some help right now because you've got a burning issue, you need something solved, you want to break free from painful relationship patterns permanently and actually make lasting progress in your healing and recovery, go to tamiemcoaching.com and click on Apply Now to learn how you can become my client.